All right, welcome to Braden's Bluegrass Blend, and I'm happy to have with me here today Darren Nicholson. And Darren, how are you doing today?
Braden, I'm great. I'm
Yeah.
coming to you live from Western North Carolina. It's a beautiful day, and I'm honored to be with you.
And on November the 15th, you are going to be performing at the Capel Arts Center in Capel, Texas. Show starts at 8 o'clock. And I want to ask you right off the bat, one thing I know because I've seen you, with Balsam Range. I know you've been with Alicia Nugent and other bands. How
Yeah.
does playing a performing arts center, how does it compare to playing like a bluegrass festival or something like that? I know for me as an audience member, I have certain things that I like, in comparison, but how is it for you, like in terms of
Well,
audience response?
I like the Arts Center vibe. Bluegrass has an amazing place everywhere. Festivals are fun. That's kind of a loose atmosphere. People are kind of talking and doing their own thing, and it's very loose. But the wonderful thing about playing arts centers or intimate concerts, listening rooms, things like that, people are they're really into the music, and it makes you as a musician and a songwriter feel appreciated. And that's the thing that kind of makes that show a little bit different. Everything is kind of laser focused on the band. People aren't just, strolling by the stage with a drink in their hand or throwing frisbees by the stage. They're there, to listen to the music. They want to hear the stories behind the songs, and it's a deeper connection, I think.
Yeah, I agree on that 100%. That's one thing I've noticed going in between a festival and a performing arts center. You can definitely tell who's there to listen.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I'll tell you right now because I've played, several of your singles on the show, and that's one thing. Your music, it's really meant for a listening audience. You just have a way of connecting with the listener, telling a story. And
Well,
so
thank you, man. I love writing songs, and we don't talk between every song. We don't talk about every song. If a song is good enough, the song will tell the story. But sometimes there's a funny way to get to it, or an interesting story about how the concept or the idea came about. And sometimes people like to dig a little deeper. They like a little deeper connection, and they like to know a little bit more about who you are personally, and personal stories of the music and the songs, and listening rooms allow you to just connect on a deeper level. But I love this music, man. I've been doing it my entire life. Everybody in my family played traditional country and bluegrass music in the mountains of Western North Carolina. We just called it music or roots music, but or hillbilly music. But that's it's just what I grew up doing, and I'm excited to bring our brand of this music to Texas.
I wanted to ask you because I was looking at your website and you've got just a really great configuration of musicians. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah,
about who's going to be performing with you?
sure. We've got Kevin Sluter playing the upright bass, and Kevin and I have been playing music together for 19 years. And Kevin is an amazing tenor singer. He's got the traditional style tenor voice, and so his voice and mine are so far, opposite. It's a nice mixture in the show. And so Kevin's an amazing singer and bass player, and he played a lot down through the years with Kenny Baker and Bobby Hicks and Josh Graves. And so Kevin's probably 50 years old, but he's a veteran to the music world, and so I'm always excited to get him out and show him off when we get outside of our area. And then we've got the great Avery Welter playing guitar with us, and he sings all the parts. He sings tenor, baritone, lead, great picker, plays all the instruments. And a lot of people remember him from touring with Newfound Road, but he's been with us for 2 years now, and he's an amazing addition to the band. And then we've got the incredible George Buckner on five-string banjo. George is one of the legends of the five-string banjo, and toured and recorded with everybody from John Hartford to Earl Scruggs. But George is another Western North Carolina gem where People from all over the world know, whether it was Ricky or Rhonda, if you want a great banjo player, you go to North Carolina. Jim Mills, Earl Scruggs, Mark Pruitt, Steve Sutton, and you got to put George Buckner in that class of musicians. So he's a treasure that we're going to get to bring and show off some North Carolina banjo. And then yeah, and then Richard Folk on percussion. So
Yeah.
he plays the wallet box, we call it, and the snare. So
Yeah. Well, and actually, you talking about George made me think of something I've always wanted to ask, particularly a musician from North Carolina, this, and this is perfect because I'm talking
yeah,
to one right now. But I've always found it interesting, in different parts of the country. Like, I'm here in Texas, and we have, a fair amount of pickers, and we have some bands here. Every pocket of the country has its own distinct thing as far or its
yeah,
identity, I guess.
yeah.
How would you classify, like, what is it about North Carolina that makes, this so special for you?
I
Or
think
what's an identifying feature of it?
you're exactly right. Northern Virginia has a sound, Kentucky, Tennessee, but Western North Carolina has a very distinct bluegrass sound, and it's my opinion that I think it's very rhythmic and it's very timing based. And so it's not a lot of you don't hear a lot of what I would consider like contest players or people who play melodic style. There's a few of them, but even the ones who play melodic play with a lot of drive and rhythm. And I think where that comes from, it's strong melody and it's strong timing. So Doc Watson and Earl Scruggs, right? Even when they're playing solos by themselves, you know where the melody is and you know where the beat is. They don't need a band to establish where the beat
Right.
is. And I think that comes from playing from years and years of entertaining themselves. One, a lot of the times, 100 years ago, in these mountain cabins in the middle of nowhere, the whole band might be the fiddle and the banjo. And so the fiddle and the banjo, you can't just kind of, do like most fiddle players and kick off song and then stand there and hold it for, 2.5 minutes. When you're there's just two of you in the band, you've got to play rhythm all the time. And so it's strong rhythmically. I think it comes from being fiddle banjo music and also when they were doing those types of performances, they were playing for dances, square dances, clogging, traditional style dancing. And so the rhythm is super strong because you got to have a really strong rhythm section to
Yeah.
play for dancers.
One thing that's really struck me about listening to your music in particular, and I think it says a lot about you as an artist, is I wouldn't classify you is strictly one, like I wouldn't say you're strictly bluegrass, and I wouldn't put you I guess what I'm trying to say is you're not one to be botched into any particular category. You just do what you want to do, and you do whatever suits the song. And I guess my question is
Yeah.
that something that you, when you were struck out on your own, is that something you set out to do, or did it just kind of happen organically?
Well, I knew I didn't. I mean, I knew that's what it was going to be. So yeah, I did set out to do that, but I didn't do it as a conscious effort to make a statement. That's just how we play, and that's just
Yeah.
how. And I think if you go back to and listen to Doc Watson's records and the early Osborne brothers and Jimmy Martin and Earl Scruggs, even like all the records that Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt did with Doc Watson on to Earl Scruggs Review, they were just wanting to make music. And they weren't going to be boxed in. And so same way with Bill Monroe. If he hadn't have got out and done his own thing, bluegrass wouldn't even exist.
Right.
But there's something funny about bluegrass people, though. If you get
Yeah.
outside of that pattern going forward, then
Yeah.
it bothers them for some reason. But
Yeah.
all of the old artists that I listened to, Jim and Jesse, the Osbournes, they were all they didn't let anybody box them into one thing. And I think part of that comes from we grew up listening to the Grand Ole Opry where I'm from,
Mhm.
and so on the Grand Ole Opry on Friday and Saturday night you would hear Conway, or you'd hear Loretta Lynn or George Jones, but then you would hear the Osbournes and Jim and Jesse and Bill Monroe. And so my parents never said, "Hey, this is bluegrass or this is country." they just said, "Hey, that's Conway Twitty. That's good. That's Bill Monroe. That's good." And it was just music. And I tell you, someone else who does that wonderfully now is Marty Stewart.
Oh
You know,
yes.
you go see a Marty Stewart show, you'll hear flavors of country music, and you'll hear really stripped down bluegrass. Sometimes it'll be just guitar and mandolin, and it gets real rootsy and back to the very basics of it. But and the thing about a good an artist like that is you're always making new songs, and you're moving a 1 foot forward while tipping a hat to the past. And I think that's what we try to do. But Flatt and Scruggs never called their music bluegrass, ever. Other folks did, but when Flatt and Scruggs left Bill Monroe, they were trying to get away from the bluegrass moniker, and they always call their music country music, and not country in the sense that like what we think of electric country music, but country music. It's for country people, people from the hills, hillbillies, and people from the country, and so. I just kind of look at it like that. We don't really care what you call our music as long as you come and have a good time.
Like I had mentioned at the very beginning before we hit the record button, I'm gonna play your two new singles. And so why don't you talk a little bit about them? Maybe talk about what inspired you to write them, record, all that.
Sure. My last two singles, we did a traditional sounding bluegrass song. I mean, we love the hardcore bluegrass. We're from North Carolina, so we used to call them 3/4 crushers, that they or an angry waltz. Jimmy Martin
Right.
and and Ralph Stanley used to have those angry waltzes in 3/4 time, and that's such a traditional, cool bluegrass sound. And we wanted to write a song like that, so we wrote a song called "No Tears Left to Cry," and it had big harmonies on it. We built the song for harmonies, and we've got guys, Avery and Kevin, absolutely sang the hide off of it. As my old buddy Audie Blaylock would say, they're plowing all the way to the fence,
Oh
son.
man.
And so we did. No Tears Left to Cry. I wrote that with my buddy Charles Humphrey, and Charles and I also wrote one called "Get Me Down the Line," which is kind of a juking. It's kind of like a bluegrass stomp kind of feel, but has lyrics to it, and just kind of a fun party song. Yeah.
So I know you because like we've talked about, you've been a sideman for years, working with everybody from Balsam Range to Alicia Nugent. How was that transition going from being in other bands to now, here you are leading your own band?
It was a fairly smooth transition. I mean, it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of pressure on me, but we're having a blast. Balsam Range. I did 50. I was one of the original members. We were all partners in that. I was one of the original five guys. I was there 15 years, and at the time, there was a guy who wanted to do less shows, and I just wanted to play more. And I think I was the only one who was doing bluegrass music full time for a living, and so I had the opportunity to go start playing more shows on my own, and I just decided to do that and pursue that path because I got fired up about music. I'm in recovery. I've been sober 5 years now. And when I went down that path, I started working on my health. I had a lot of this extra time on my hands, and to fill that time, I got fired up about music, and I just started playing tons of shows and writing songs, and now I've just got it's the best life I've ever had, as because I'm putting the music first, and I think our band is going to end up doing about 175 dates this year, and we play quite a bit in our region: Western North Carolina, East Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia. But we go out west 2 or 3 times a year, and we've gone to Canada, and we're getting out there more and more, and we love coming to places like Coppell, Texas, and making new friends and sharing Western North Carolina music and culture with people. We love it.
I read this in your bio, and I think, and I would have to agree with it because I don't know if you recall, I actually met you many years ago. You came out to the Dallas area
Yeah,
with Balsam Range, and I
yeah,
met you one of those. And one of the things that you said is, you really the connection with your fans is so important to you as an artist, and I can attest to that firsthand. I knew it from when I first met you that that was something that really was important to you, and like I said, I read it in your website, and I'm like, yeah, that's right on the money there. So how, I guess what I'm leading into is how is like the fan engagement, like how does that influence what you do musically or otherwise?
Well, it does. One, we pick songs. We love to have people clapping along. We love to have them singing along. We want people to come to a show, and we love the listening rooms, but it's not just, we're not one of those bands where we're like, shh, please, everybody be quiet. No, we want you to have a good time. Our motto is big and friendly. We're the Darren Nicholson band, and we're big and friendly, and we're here to make friends, and we're here for you to have a good time, and we're here to entertain you. And we want to make people feel welcome. We like for them to feel like they're in our living room, whether we're in Coppell, Texas, or in North Carolina or New York, and because that's the vibe that we want to put out. Part of being in Western North Carolina is tourism and development. A lot of the reason that we don't travel as much as some other bands is because a lot of people come here to see us play in Western North. This is a tourist
Yeah,
destination.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
we invite people here. Welcome to our home. We want you to feel welcome. And when you come to our show, we want you to sing along, clap along. We want you to have an experience and not just go see a band. You're not coming to see us. You're coming to have a good time with us. And the fans are, I don't like to say fans. That's kind of a bad, ugly word to me, because I've always just made friends in music. I don't want to make fans. I want to make friends. And it's one of the few places and industries where
yeah,
you can buy a ticket and go shake hands with the person you just saw on stage and have a conversation with them. When I got the bluegrass bug, when I really got, I mean, I was around it my whole life. And my mom and dad had Flatt and Scruggs and Jimmy Jesse and Bill Monroe, but I got into the Osborne brothers. And why I love them so much is because the music was bluegrass, but the singing was country.
yeah,
It was kind of had a country flavor. Bobby had this George Jones kind of thing, maybe George Jones in a higher octave, but like
yeah.
it had this country phrasing to it, but the picking was on fire, and that was like the best of both worlds to me. So when I heard the Osborne brothers, I was like, okay, I was 16, and I got rid of my fiddle, and I got rid of my electric guitar, and I got a mandolin. And I remember that summer I saw them at the Cherokee Bluegrass Festival. I aggravated my parents. They were so sick of the Osborne brothers by the time we went to Cherokee. I wore them out. But I got to meet Sonny and I got to meet
Yeah.
Bobby. They signed things, and they were, Bobby was super, super nice. And I ended up becoming kind of pals with him later on. And I ended up, after he passed away, I've got some of his stuff at my
Oh,
house. Some things that belong to Bobby and that are very, very important to me. And
wow.
and conversations with him on the phone. He told me some great stories about him plugging his mandolin up at the Grand Ole Opry, and Bill Monroe didn't know that it was plugged up, and it was so loud, and Bill kept trying to buy it from him. He didn't know he had it plugged up. And so those are the kind of things that happen when you go see bluegrass people. These conversations and these memories. It's about making memories.
Yeah.
We want folks to come see us when we're in Texas. We did this show a couple of years ago. We had a great show in Coppell, and we had Lindsey Pruitt on the fiddle with us, but Avery wasn't with us. So we've got the full 5-piece band with George Buckner on banjo and Avery and all the guys. So we're excited to bring Western North Carolina bluegrass to Texas, and our you know and that was it was such a fun night. And I'm hoping that if you're a bluegrass fan or just a music fan in general, you'll come hang out with us.
Well, and I can tell you folks who are listening right now, I can tell you if you've never experienced Darren Nicholson, whether it be live or on record, I mean you're in for a real treat. I mean he's like I said, not one to be boxed into any category. He does what he wants to do, and anything you do is good. I mean,
Well,
everything
thank you,
you've put
man.
out, I've immensely enjoyed your recordings, and like we were talking about earlier, he'll be at the Capel Arts Center. That is Saturday, November the 15th, 8 o'clock p.m. So hope you guys will go out and see him and hang out with Darren. So man,
That's right.
it's been wonderful talking to you today. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for all you do for the music, and hopefully I'll see you there, man. If
Yeah,
you,
I'll do. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
All right. Absolutely.